A vision for a united North America, security, justice, and economic fairness. North America faces interconnected challenges: cartel violence, human trafficking, gun smuggling, and economic inequity that demand bold, unified action. By opening borders with Mexico and Canada, forming the United North America, UNA, and implementing sweeping reforms in security, gun control, criminal justice, social policy, and taxation, we can create a safer, more equitable continent. Below, I outline a transformative agenda and explain why each component is essential for our collective future. Open borders and the United North America, UNA. Opening borders with Mexico and Canada under the UNA framework would drive economic growth, cultural exchange, and collective security. Free movement of people and goods would boost trade, reduce disparities, and strengthen ties. The UNA would align the three nations on shared goals like combating crime and promoting human rights while respecting sovereignty. Economically, open borders would increase GDP through labor mobility and streamlined trade. Socially, they would foster mutual understanding, reducing division. Security-wise, a unified approach would counter threats like cartels, which exploit border weaknesses through joint development and enforcement programs. A new treaty to eradicate cartels. Cartels thrive in Mexico due to corruption and resource shortages. A UNA treaty allowing U.S. federal armed forces to operate in Mexico and Canada with local consent and oversight would dismantle these networks through joint task forces and intelligence sharing. This would curb human trafficking, drug smuggling, and weapons dealing, saving lives and stabilizing communities. U.S. support would bolster Mexico's forces, while Canada's involvement ensures a holistic approach. Transparency and host nation approval would address sovereignty concerns, with funding for local law enforcement and social programs to reduce cartel recruitment. Addressing the U.S. role in arming cartels. Most guns used in Mexican crimes originate in the U.S., fueling cartel violence. Requiring ballistic readings for every firearm, mandatory background checks for all sales, and third-party registries for private transactions would trace weapons and close loopholes, barring individuals with violent histories, including domestic abuse, from ownership, with felony penalties for violations, would reduce illegal flows. These measures target criminals, not law-abiding citizens, enhancing safety across borders while respecting Second Amendment rights. Reforming felony restrictions. Nonviolent felons should not face blanket bans on firearm ownership or employment. Allowing them to own guns for self-defense or hunting and access jobs unrelated to their crimes promotes rehabilitation and reduces recidivism. This balances public safety with individual rights, recognizing that not all felons pose equal risks. Abortion law reform requiring both parents' consent for abortion, except in cases of rape or incest, ensures fairness while prioritizing victim autonomy. This fosters dialogue, reduces unilateral decisions, and respects reproductive complexity, promoting social cohesion. Term limits for politicians and judges. To ensure a dynamic and accountable government, we must impose strict term limits on politicians and judges, eliminating lifelong appointments and excessive post-service benefits. No elected official, whether in Congress, state legislatures, or local government, should serve more than 2 consecutive terms, totaling 8 years for most offices. Federal and state judges, including Supreme Court justices, should be limited to a single 12-year term. These caps prevent entrenched power, encourage fresh perspectives, and reduce the risk of corruption that festers with prolonged tenure. Lifelong judicial appointments, like those currently for federal judges, create unaccountable elites who can shape policy for decades, often out of touch with evolving public values. Term limits ensure the judiciary remains responsive without undermining independence, as 12 years allows for significant contributions while preventing stagnation. For politicians, term limits curb careerism, forcing elected officials to prioritize public good over re-election strategies. This fosters innovation, as new leaders bring diverse ideas to address modern challenges. Retired politicians should not receive permanent pensions, which effectively reward them for life at taxpayer expense. Instead, they should receive 1/4 of their public servant salary for 10 years post-service, providing a reasonable transition period to find alternative employment. This reform ends the culture of handouts that makes politicians some of the nation's biggest welfare recipients. By requiring them to re-enter the workforce, we align their incentives with those of ordinary citizens, ensuring they remain connected to the economic realities faced by the public. These changes would enhance democracy and fairness. Term limits break up political dynasties, giving new voices, especially from underrepresented groups, a chance to lead. Capping post-service benefits saves billions, redirecting funds to critical needs like education or infrastructure. Critics may argue that experience is lost, but long tenures often breed complacency, not expertise. A steady influx of new leaders accountable to the people and not cushioned by lifelong perks will create a government that truly serves, not rules, its citizens. Holding politicians accountable for sex crimes. Politicians accused of sex crimes should face immediate administrative leave at half pay, pending swift, transparent investigations. Guilty findings trigger severe financial and legal penalties. This restores trust, deters misconduct, and upholds accountability for those in power. Severe penalties for sex crimes. Sex crimes against children warrant execution, reflecting their irreparable harm. Other sex crimes should result in castration for a first offense, with death for subsequent violations. Swift, severe penalties deter recidivism and prioritize victim protection, sending a clear message against bodily violations. Tax reform and economic equity. A flat 15% federal tax rate with no loopholes simplifies the system and ensures fairness. Individuals below the federal poverty level pay no federal taxes, only state taxes, with their employers covering federal taxes for these workers. Employers contributing to the Public Security Fund, PSF, receive tax breaks, incentivizing support for public welfare. The PSF, funded by 3% of all taxes, guarantees all Americans access to health insurance and basic utilities, gas, electricity, phone, internet. Americans earning under $50,000 annually qualify for food and travel cards, covering groceries, vehicle purchases every 10 years, gasoline, maintenance, and insurance, with funds scaled by income, location, and family needs. This reform reduces poverty and boosts economic security. A flat tax eliminates complexity and loopholes that favor the wealthy, ensuring everyone pays their share. Exempting low-income earners and shifting their tax burden to employers supports the most vulnerable while encouraging fair labor practices. The PSF ensures universal access to essentials, reducing inequality and improving quality of life. Food and travel cards empower low-income families, stimulating local economies through increased spending on necessities and mobility. These measures create a safety net that prioritizes people over corporations. Curbing political insider trading. Politicians and their immediate families must be barred from purchasing stocks while in office to prevent insider trading. Violations result in heavy fines and immediate removal from office. This ensures public servants prioritize the public good, not personal enrichment, restoring trust in governance. By eliminating conflicts of interest, we promote ethical leadership and fair markets. Abolishing the Electoral College. The Electoral College distorts democratic representation, giving disproportionate power to smaller states. Replacing it with a one-citizen, one-vote system ensures every voice counts equally, reflecting the will of the majority. This strengthens democracy, encourages voter participation, and aligns governance with public needs, fostering a more responsive government. Streamlining the military. Combining Space Force with the Air Force, Navy with the Coast Guard, and Army with the Marines into 3 branches reduces redundancy and cuts military spending. Redirecting savings to education and infrastructure strengthens the nation's future. Streamlined forces maintain defense capabilities while prioritizing domestic needs like schools, roads, and public transit, which drive long-term prosperity and resilience. Prioritizing people over banks. The 2008 bailouts of banks and housing markets cost taxpayers billions, while ordinary Americans struggled. Future crises must prioritize wiping individual debts over rescuing institutions. This would cost less, improve economic security, and boost spending as debt-free citizens invest in homes, education, and businesses. By focusing on people, we prevent wealth concentration and rebuild trust in governance. Why this agenda works. This plan tackles North America's challenges holistically. Open borders and the UNA drive economic and security cooperation. The Anti-Cartel Treaty dismantles criminal networks. Gun reforms curb violence. Felony and abortion reforms balance rights and rehabilitation. Sex crime penalties and political accountability restore justice and trust. Tax reform, stock bans, electoral reform, military streamlining, and people-first bailouts create an equitable, democratic, and resilient society. Critics may argue open borders risk security, but unified enforcement mitigates this. Gun control opponents may resist registries, but they target criminals, not citizens. Harsh sex crime penalties reflect the gravity of harm. Tax reform critics may balk at employer burdens, but tax breaks incentivize compliance. Electoral reform opponents may cling to tradition, but democracy demands fairness. This agenda takes responsibility for our challenges, building a stronger, fairer North America for all. By Scott Young, aka Synfamous Gamer.